Well, for more on this story, I'm joined by our International Affairs Editor, Philip Turle. Philip, what kind of atmosphere can we expect then in that meeting?
I suspect, Caris, that atmosphere is going to be pretty tense today because there is a lot of worry in Greenland and pretty much the same feeling in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and amongst many other European Union leaders and members of NATO. They don't really know what the US is going to do. There's a lot of hot and cold being blown out of Washington over this. And I think the whole situation in Greenland for the moment is one of uncertainty. Exactly what is going to happen. Is the US going to launch an attack, and if so, when and how? And what will the outcome be for NATO afterwards? Can all be summed up, I think, in a sentence by Jens Frederik Nielsen, the Prime Minister of Greenland, who just said, if we have to choose here and now between the United States and Denmark, we choose Denmark. And that's pretty much the feeling amongst most of the people in Greenland. If you look at the opinion polls, only 6% of Greenlanders actually say they would prefer joining the United States than Denmark. What they really want is total independence. They want to be away from Denmark, but they don't want to be in the hands of the United States. Why trade in the Danes for the Americans? 84% of Greenlanders said they would support independence from Denmark. 61 are against it, however, if it means that their level of lifestyle is going to suffer as a result of that. Now, there are two important things to bring into account as far as what the Greenlanders would suffer from. The first one is the economy. There is a block grant which comes from the Danes every year, which is about $650 million. If Denmark were to pull out in the event of the Americans launching an attack, that money would no longer be sent to Greenland, and Greenland would have to fill the hole itself. That would take quite a long time, and that would obviously bring down the standard of living for many people. And the second point is the welfare factor, because the Danish welfare system is linked to that, the Greenlandic welfare system is linked to that in Denmark, which means that people living in Greenland have access to hospitals in Denmark if they want to, free healthcare. They don't want to trade that in for the situation, the system in the United States, where you have to take out health insurance and people will have to pay for much of their hospitalization out of their own pockets. So that is also a no-go. So those are the issues that are basically preventing the Greenlanders from wanting to become American. But I think that the main priority for them is not to become American, not to remain Danish, but as I said, to be independent. Now, the other element here, which is important to underline, is that the Prime Minister of Greenland and the Foreign Minister of Denmark, Lars Rasmussen, wanted to meet only with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. J.D. Vance, who's been much more outspoken and in favour of the annexation of Greenland, is heading that meeting today, so that's why I think things could be pretty tense.
And so, given all of this, what are the chances that the US will seize Greenland by force?
Well, that's the question we can't answer, and that's why everyone is so worried about this. Donald Trump has underlined time and time again that he says the United States needs Greenland. He just recently said the US has to have ownership over Greenland, and NATO has got to understand that. That is why there is this worry that if the United States were to go into Greenland, it would signal the end of NATO, because the US is a member of NATO, Denmark is a member of NATO, therefore it would be two countries pitting one against the other, and that's something that's never happened before. So, would it lead to the destruction of NATO? That we don't know. Does Donald Trump care? We don't know about that either. Second hypothesis here is that Donald Trump proposes to buy Greenland. He's already put forward the idea of $10,000 per Greenlander or $100,000 for certain Greenlanders, but that is a no-go because the Greenlanders feel that what the Americans really want is to move into Greenland, to get hold of the natural resources there, as in the form of oil, gas, gold, all these precious metals that can be used in the making of mobile phones and computers, and they feel that that is certainly not value for money. The third option here is the US builds more bases in Greenland. Now, there is this 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement, which means that the US can basically do what it wants. If it gets the agreement of the Danes and of NATO, it can build as many bases and put as many troops as it wants in Denmark. They're saying, well, why don't you just take advantage of that? That would help protect Greenland, and it would also help protect the area around there from the Chinese and from the Russians, which is what the US says it is worried about happening, although there's no proof of that right now. France has said it's going to open a consulate there. That's something also that the French have indicated they were keen to do to try to convince the Americans not to launch any attacks against Greenland. That'll be part of many other countries that already have honorary consulates in Greenland. But when push comes to shove, if the Americans do launch an attack, they could get into Greenland, take control of Nuuk in about half an hour. There's not going to be any pushback by anybody. The size of the Greenlandic military is about the same as that of the New York police department. So there's not going to be any fighting going on. The US would just have to put their flag up and say, this is now our territory, in which case Denmark would pull itself out of Greenland. One final point on this, and that is that Donald Trump is seen as maybe wanting to treat Greenland in the same way as he did Venezuela, but there is no real comparison here because there are no drugs coming out of Greenland. There is no rogue leader running Greenland. Greenland is a NATO member, as I said, and the US already has its bases there. So in the view of the Danes, there's no reason for the Americans to go in there at all.
Yeah, some analysts have said that, the US doesn't need to seize or to annex Greenland. What are some alternatives?
So what could they do? Well, the first one is a new NATO mission. This is something that Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, was talking about. We saw in that report just now, saying that could act as a way of persuading the Americans it would be a foolish idea to try to take control of Greenland because they are also members of NATO. The second one is that Denmark sends in a military contingent to Greenland, or the European Union sends in a military contingent to Greenland as a way of putting off the United States. But if the US did go in there and there was open fighting between that contingent and the US military, the contingent wouldn't stand a chance, basically, and that would certainly cause even more problems afterwards. A third suggestion is that instead of the United States, it's Canada and Iceland and Norway that get more involved in looking after Greenland. Certainly Norway is seen as being more friendly towards Greenland than Denmark has been in the old days. But the question there is, would Canada and Iceland want to take on the task of providing social benefits that Greenlanders covet and which are provided by NATO and Denmark? That is also probably not sure right now. So a lot of elements on the table that are going to be discussed today in those discussions taking place in the White House. I think still a lot of concern. And the bottom line is we still don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. So I think from Greenland and Denmark's point of view, it's time to fasten your safety belts.
All right. Well, we will be keeping a close eye on that meeting at the White House.